Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tera Vanachari. Jamuna Tera Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Asto Tarasatya Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Kvantara Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Achita, Haribo, I can see you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning. Today we're reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 9, which is entitled Liberation. Chapter 19, King Yayati achieves liberation. Text number 11. Is that correct? Sambada Vrishanasopi Yajaya Kupalabdhaya Kalam Bahutitam Badre Karmarnadyapyatushyati Sambada Vrishanasopi Yajaya Kupalabdhaya Kalam Bahutitam Badre Karmayarnadyapitushati Sambada Vishanasopi Yajaya Kupalabdhaya Kalam Bahutitam Badre Karmayarnadyapitushati Sambada Vrishanasopi He Ajaya Kupalabdhaya Kalam Bahutitam Badre Karmayarnadyapitushati Sambada Vrishanasopi He Ajaya Kupalabdhaya Kalam Bahutitam Badre Karmayarnadyapitushati Sambada Vrishanasopi Yajaya Kupalabdhaya Kalam Bahutitam Badre Karmayarnadyapitushati. Ladies? Sambada Vrishanasopi Yajaya Kupalabdhaya Sambada Vrishanasopi Yajaya Kupalabdhaya Kalam Bahutitam Badre Karmayarnadyapitushati Sambada Vrishanasopi Yajaya Kupalabdhaya Sambada Vrishana rejoined with his testicles. Saha, he, api, also, he, indeed, Ajaya, with the she-goat, Kupalabdhaya, whom he got from the well, Kalam, for a time, bahutitam, of a long, long duration. Bhadre, O my dear wife, kamai, with such lusty desires, na, not, adya api, even until now, tushyati, is satisfied. My dear wife, when the he-goat had his testicles restored, he enjoyed the she-goat he had gotten from the well. But although he continued to enjoy for many, many years, even now he has not been fully satisfied. Purport. When one is bound by affection for one's wife, one is attached to sexual desires that are very difficult to overcome. Therefore, according to Vedic civilization, one must voluntarily leave his so-called home and go to the forest. Panchashordvam vanam brajet. Human life is meant for such tapasya or austerity. By the austerity of voluntarily stopping sex life at home and going to the forest to engage in spiritual activities, in the association of devotees, one achieves the actual purpose of human life. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahiyam Tadati Svapadantikam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam. Who's speaking here? Yayati. What is the allegory that Yayati is using to describe his life? Yeah, put your hand up if you think you know. Huh? Yeah, he-goat and she-goat. Referring to who? Yayati and Devayani. Samishta also. She's in there as well. Yeah. Okay. So this is rather graphic, isn't it? We have the image of... No, it's interesting. For me, it's interesting to be autobiographical. The image of a goat is quite compelling and stark. When I was apparently this is a disqualification for being a temple president, but when I was 18, 19, I worked at the Adelaide Zoo. And this is before I'd met the devotees, but I decided that I would become a vegetarian. When I was 15, I decided I had to become a vegetarian. So at the zoo, there were a number of things that happened at that time that's deeply etched in my consciousness, because they were lessons, stark lessons in the reality of material existence. And one of them that didn't really have much of an impact on me until later on when I read the Bhagavatam. And one of the things that I used to see was they would bring the old police horses, the old grey horses, to the zoo, and the zoo had a butcher house, not very pleasant at all. So I used to see they would, with a bolt, they would kill the horses and then cut them up. Because, in a zoo you've got lions and tigers, and they're not vegetarians, by the way. In fact, I remember standing on top of the tigers. I was basically a labourer. I would repair cages, build and repair cages. One of the things that I did. So I remember working on the roof of the tiger's cage, and the tiger would be walking up and down underneath, eyeing us off. Who knows what he was thinking. So, but I saw starkly birth and death and the suffering that came with it. None of those animals that were slaughtered there wanted to die. Right? None of them. And that was a shocking experience for me. So anyway, back to the goat. There was a goat, an old goat. This is why the goat is an interesting example here. And this old goat, he was a stinky old thing. So they used to tie him up out the back, a long way from where anybody was, because he smelt so bad. Right? And one of the reasons why he was like that was because he was always passing semen. Horrible. Right? So there was a challenging image, but interesting here, right? Interesting here. The example of a goat is pertinent because the goat's very attached to sex life. Right? So Yayati has chosen to portray himself as a goat, and as a goat attached to enjoying with the she-goat. The he-goat likes to enjoy with the she-goat. Except what happened? What happened? What happened to Maharaj Yayati? Huh? That's ultimately, yes, but what happened? God cursed. Because of his desire to enjoy not only with his wife, right, Devayani, but also despite the warning of ISKCON, right, he also was obliged to satisfy his dependent, Samishta, right? And even it was described in that it was last chapter, we were talking about how his engagement with Samishta was not against religious principles. So it wasn't wrong, but it angered ISKCON, and so therefore he was cursed. Okay. Become an old man. Right, so in this story, in the story of the goat, right, that's symbolized by the goat having his testicles chopped off, which is, for materialistic men, that's kind of like the worst thing that could happen to you. Which is indicative of what old age is all about. With old age, one loses one's youth, but not the desire to enjoy. Right? Not the desire to enjoy. So, in the story that's being recounted here, or described here by Maharaj Yayati, he's describing how he was able to trade his older age with one of his sons and get his son, Puru, wasn't it? Got his son's youth. Got his youth back because his son was so obedient that he took the old age of his father. In other words, he was prepared to sacrifice his youth for the benefit of his father, so his father could continue enjoying. And so that example is given here, Sambada Vrishana, which is quite graphic really when you think about it. He's rejoined with his testicles. Hare Krishna. And so he could enjoy again. So, and there's another interesting example given here also. And he mentions how he'd gotten her from the well, right? And very often in the Bhagavatam, the well is described as a place where one's entrapped, right? It's a trap. Have any of you seen a well in the fields in India or anywhere? Yes? Yes. Yeah, you have to be careful around a well. Speaking of wells, my uncle had a well in his backyard and it was covered over with wooden, and had a pump. You could pump water out of it. It was a big, it might have been 2 acres of land in Hawthorne in Adelaide. And he'd built the house on the front of the property, but at the back it was all fruit trees, and it was beautiful. Summertime especially. Summertime, January, you could go into my uncle's backyard and climb the apricot tree, eat fresh apricots. There were peaches, he was growing grapes, there was a fig tree. So you could just lounge around all day in my uncle's backyard and eat fresh fruit. Beautiful. But of course you had to be careful about the well. And you know, for boys, wells are intriguing. So what's going on here? But also dangerous, because if you fall in a well, what happens? You can be lost, right? You can be lost. So another example from the Bhagavatam is of the danger of falling into the well. And the well is the epitome of materialistic life, right? Especially householder life that's just for enjoying sense gratification. We don't do that, do we? No. No sense gratification. Well, some sense gratification. Rishikesha rishikena sevanam bhakti uchyate, right? We engage our senses in the service of the master of the senses. So devotional service is encouraged, actually is the only alternative to materialistic life. Right? And so we have this image, it's quite graphic, this verse is quite graphic because the goat had his testicles removed, then he got them back again, and then he was able to enjoy with the she-goat that he got out of a well, right? So now, and as Suchitra pointed out, what was the end result of his enjoyment? What was the end result of his enjoyment? Was he happy? Natushyati, is it? Let's have a look here. What does it say? What's that word there? Nadyapi, up until now, tushyati, not. Right? Not satisfied. You can see that we have our nice house in Albert Park. We have our nice cars, right? Our children are going to the Middle Park Primary, right? And are we happy? Well, in part we could be happy, but the deep, satisfaction that comes from sense gratification basically doesn't exist. We're always looking for something else. There's got to be something else. Why do I feel inadequate? Why do I feel incomplete? Right? So even, have you had the experience? You've achieved sense gratification, and for a moment you might be happy. Right? But then you wake up the next morning and there's a bill that has to be paid. Right? Or something. Right? Our beautiful children are now ill, right? And we've got to look after them. There's always some, it's the pinprick, if you like, of material existence. So one of the reasons why Yayati is telling this story is because ultimately, even though he was able to enjoy pretty much to his heart's content, still he wasn't happy. He wasn't satisfied. Which is interesting because in the Bhagavatam it describes how by the performance of devotional service one can actually be happy. And that's by the performance of devotional service. And of course, that's what Yayati is going to... Because the interesting thing is, in this whole... There's hundreds of names of dynasty in this 9th canto of the Bhagavatam, right? And one might think, why all of these? Why all of these names? Right? But one of the reasons why this long list of names is because most of these personalities are actually great devotees. Right? Right? And Yayati, even though, and we see it, we see it with even the denizens of the heavenly planets, even we see it with the demons also. They become frustrated with material existence and seeking out material pleasure, right? And the end result is that they take ultimately to the process of bhakti. Right? They have this endearing shraddha or faith in the supreme or the sublime or the transcendental, beyond the material. Right? So, and even though they may get distracted from time to time, right? Yayati got distracted, right? But eventually, because of that underlying shraddha, they come into the association of the devotees, they hear from the devotees, they take up the process, the practice of bhakti, right? Sadhana, and eventually progress through the stages of devotional service to the point of anatta nivritti, and then steadiness, nishta, ruchi, etc. Asakti. They develop an attachment to serving Krishna. They develop their devotional service. So that's what eventually Yayati Maharaj becomes a devotee, and a famous. Well, and every devotee actually is famous. So Bhakti Pareshana Bhavo Viraktiya, the performance of devotional service brings about a natural inclination, a natural tendency to be aloof from material pursuits, material existence, right? Pushti tushti chud apayanonugasam is mentioned. That just like a person, bhakti is such a satisfying engagement, it's like a person sitting down to eat a meal, which we'll do in about half an hour, right? We'll sit down and have prasadam. So what happens? What happens when you're hungry and you sit down and have breakfast? What happens? Hopefully, this is what happens. Eat and be happy. No, we say chant and be happy. Right? Chant and be happy. But if they didn't feed us, we wouldn't come back, right? We like to. So pushti, tushti, chud. As a result, so when we're eating, our desire to taste, right? Hands up, who likes burfis? Radha Ballabha's Mahaprasadam burfi. Everybody, yeah. Yep. What about puri? Yeah. What about sabji? Puri and sabji. You can't eat puri by itself. Well, you can, but it's not meant to be by itself, right? Puri's meant to be with sabji. Why? It hasn't been offered yet. Oh yes, it's been offered. Yep. Oh, we can think about it now, it's okay. Yeah. Pushti, tushti. So the desire to taste and also nourishment. You know, if you eat puri, sabji, halva, burfi. Oh, that's good, isn't it? Huh? Ooh. I used to really enjoy the 9 o'clock offering, but you didn't get no burfi at the 9 o'clock. It's only besan laddu. I don't know. But the thing about the 9 o'clock is it's all sabji and puri. But I discovered very quickly that 9 o'clock puri and sabji made Mangalati very difficult. That's why I remember more than once, you know, after Nashringa prayers, you pay your obeisances, right? And I remember waking up, you know, Brindai, Tosadevya, on the floor, glued to the floor because of the puri and the sabji for the 9 o'clock. So, but you know, there's nourishment comes from a healthy meal, right? So we enjoy the eating, we become nourished, and hunger is diminished. You're not hungry anymore, right? Korma used to, for Janmashtami, often he would cook 108 preparations for Janmashtami. We don't do it anymore because too many people. But in those days, all of the devotees would fit upstairs, right, for after the Vyasa Puja celebrations. And we'd be looking forward to honouring the 108 preparations that Korma cooked for Janmashtami, right? But by the end of the meal, you know, have you ever tried to eat 108 preparations? You know, by the end of the serving of the prasadam, there'd still be things left over, right? And the devotees would come and they just offer you one little grain of rice. You go, no, go away, you've had enough. At the beginning of the meal, it's like, come on. And by the time you've got to 80 preps, if you made it that far, it's like, no, I've had enough. Just to show one piece of rice. Right. So naturally, as a result of eating, honouring the prasadam, the desire to enjoy the nourishment that comes from eating, but also the hunger is gone, completely gone. Well, at least until you've digested. Then you're hungry again. There's material. So the performance of bhakti is described like that. We engage in Krishna's service, and our desire to enjoy a variety of activities is naturally satisfied by the performance of devotional service. Not only that, we become enthused and inspired to serve. And as a consequence, also, our taste for material activities is destroyed, practically speaking, by the performance of devotional service. Right? Pushti tushti chudapayanonugasam. By the performance of bhakti, then we become completely satisfied. And we see that with Maharaj Yayati, right? Why there's this long list of kings and their wives and sons and daughters, because many of them, because they're coming in the dynasty of Lord Ramchandra's line, right? Most of them are great devotees, that's why they're there. And we know, as a result of that devotional service, that they become got distracted and caught up in material life, right? but ultimately are liberated because of the performance of devotional service, which is why these pastimes are so important for us to study. Sometimes you might think, why this long list of names, right? But they're devotees, most of them. And their performance of devotional service is an inspiration for us, who also might have, on occasion, become distracted by material life. Have you been distracted by material life? Yes. No, not now. That's why we hear the Bhagavatam, right? Regularly hear the Bhagavatam, because that's one of the most important practices for achieving that chud, right? That detachment. We become detached from material existence because of the performance of devotional service. Very powerful. So, now it's interesting here. Prabhupada gives the example of vanaprastha, right? And Prabhupada says, when one is bound by affection for one's wife, you're married? You have affection for your wife? There's a test here. Test. I won't tell her, okay? Maybe some of her friends might. Are you attached to your wife? Trying to be, or not be. You attached to your husbands? Yes, more honest over here. The men don't want to admit that they're attached. I'm renounced. But as soon as his wife tells him to do something, he's got to do it, right? Otherwise he's in trouble. Yep. So it's very interesting. Prabhupada says here, according to Vedic civilization, so this is a principle of Vedic civilization. It's difficult to overcome the attachment because of the knot, the Hridaya Granthis. The Bhagavatam talks about this. Why we study the Bhagavatam, why we hear these stories, especially this one for Maharaj Ayati, is because it cuts the knot of material attachment, right? So Prabhupada says here, according to Vedic civilization, one must voluntarily leave home and go to the forest. Life is meant for such tapasya or austerity, right? And Prabhupada quotes this verse, Panchasordhvam vanambrajet. What's that mean? You know what that means? Panchasordhvam vanambrajet. It means when you turn 50, Panchasordhvam means 50, go to the forest, right? And be careful with this, quoting this. Once I told my mum, when I turn 50, I'm going to go to the forest, right? So when I turned 50, my mum said, when are you going to go to the forest? So we have to be careful about being too literal about what we preach. In fact, sometimes better we don't preach, just behave properly. Right? Don't say, as I mentioned many times this year, I thought it was quite humorous. Bhakti Marg Swami said, preach, and if you must, say something. Right? So in other words, set a good example. Don't talk too much. Right? And of course, a devotee, whether, what is it? Grihe tako, mane tako, sada balo haridako. Have you heard that? This is Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Grihe tako, whether you live in a griha, or vane tako, whether you live in the forest, vanaprastha. Sada, always balo haridako, always chant Hare Krishna. So it doesn't matter if you live in the forest or live in the griha. It's all, the focus is bhakti, pareshana bhavo viraktiya. The renunciation automatically comes if we're engaged in chanting Hare Krishna and serving Krishna at home. And even because it's very difficult actually to give up completely sense gratification, right? So in the Bhagavad Gita, it's very interesting. Arjuna wants to solve his problem by saying, I'm going to go and live in the forest. I'm going to renounce everything. And what does Krishna say? But ultimately, what does Krishna say to that idea? Huh? No, silly idea. You're not going to do that. What can repression accomplish? Right? What can repression accomplish? You act anyway, because that's your nature. So really, one of the messages of the Bhagavad Gita is understand and know who you are. Right? And then use that, your self, and in the Bhagavad Gita, the self is described at multiple levels, right? There's the gross body, right, which we've all got, but then along with the gross body, what else comes? Subtle body. What's that? The mind, intelligence, false ego, right? So we've got to use that as well, along with the higher self, right, which is the spirit soul, which we all know that we're not the body. Right? But try just acting on the spiritual platform. Try it. Don't go to breakfast, right? Just operate on pure spiritual Shakti, right? None of us can do that. Yeah. So it's interesting. Arjuna is a Kshatriya. He's a householder. He's an administrator, right? He's a warrior. So it's surprising, isn't it, when you think about it, that Arjuna's arguments to avoid the battle are quite valid, right? We can say, yeah, peace, man, peace. But what does Krishna say? No, fight. Oh. And of course, that's with the understanding of who Arjuna actually is and ultimately what Krishna wants, right? Which is a bit shocking, really, when you think about it. That means Krishna wanted the battle of Kurukshetra. Ultimately, we'd have to accept that, wouldn't we? Because he didn't really, but also paritranaya saudunam vinashaya chaduskritam. Right? So most of us are going to be grihasta, right? Grihe dako. We live at home. we live at home. Some of us will also be vane dako. We'll live in the forest. Renounced. The renounced order. Effectively, that's what that represents. So panchasodvam branam brajet, at any age really, if we're engaged in devotional service, then we're no longer on the material platform, we're operating on the spiritual platform, right? And so even family, life, even Krishna says, what is it? Even the procreation of children within religious principles, that I am. So that can also be part of our devotional service. Right? So, but without devotional service, we'll not get to that point of detachment. Right? We'll remain attached. And why we regularly hear the Bhagavatam, because you know that Hridaya Granthis is very strongly tied within the heart. Right? But by regularly hearing the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, we can cut the knots of material attachment. Right? Of course, you know what happens is what we've seen in immature renunciation, then there's a callousness towards others, right? We become callous to our wife, to our children, to others broadly. Oh, you're all in a sense gratification and I'm a renunciate. Out of my way. Well, we have to be careful. But what's required ultimately is a mature sense of renunciation that comes from the performance, from a lifetime of practice of bhakti ultimately. And so, along with there being, like we saw with Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada was very austere and detached, but at the same time very soft-hearted and very supportive of and encouraging of everybody, right? Which is why too much renunciation isn't healthy, because you become hard-hearted and mistreat others, mistreat yourself by being too austere and then too hard on others. Whereas the real advancement comes, or with real advancement comes a sense of detachment, but with a strong appreciation and understanding of the equality of everybody. This is very important. Samoham sarvabhuteshu. Not so easy. But Prabhupada mentions in the Bhagavad Gita that's a symptom of a pure devotee. Right? Sees everybody equally and treats everybody equally. Right? And ultimately that treatment of equality for a devotee is giving people an opportunity to chant Hare Krishna. Why we distribute so many books. Give transcendental knowledge to everybody. Give everybody an opportunity to engage in devotional service, ultimately. Because we know from that, what is it? What did I say? Pushti tushti chud. We become satisfied from that engagement in Krishna's service and the adventures that we have, in preaching especially. And we become nourished by that. We're happy. We don't mind the austerity of performing devotional service. In fact, we're nourished and enthused by that. And of course, we virakti, our bhakti develops, and along with bhakti, there's detachment. Right? But a mature sense of detachment, not that I give everything up, but rather the attraction for enjoying the material, from a material perspective, is removed because there's enjoyment on the spiritual platform. We enjoy chanting Hare Krishna. We enjoy hearing the philosophy. We enjoy serving Radha Vallabha. We enjoy preaching, ultimately, setting a good example. Okay, so, yes, I was embarrassed when my mum said to me, okay, now you're 50, where do you go into the forest? Oop, you got me. But the principle is become detached, right? Which you can do even if you're a householder living at home, chanting Hare Krishna, following the process of bhakti. The desire for sense gratification is comes and then goes. So does anybody have any comments or questions on any of these points? Son.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for a nice class. How one can ensure that he is not falling into trap?
Not falling into a trap.
Like say, not falling into that Koopa-like situation.
How?
Because you're saying that it takes a lifetime of practice. So
Yeah. Not easy. Not easy to I think, well, for us, primarily staying in the association of devotees is important, because there are so many levels of attachment, right? On a subtle and a gross level, but most we struggle with is the subtle level, right? We want to be a big devotee. I'm a big devotee. Touch my feet. Give me a garland. Right? Yeah, do what I tell you to do. But then, you know, we're revealed for just being a petty little tyrant. Right? So, you know, the most important thing, the most important qualification to be developed is service attitude, right? And that is service at home, service at work, service, and not wanting to usurp Krishna's position. Right? Ultimately, the Bhagavad Gita is about serving Krishna. Ultimately, right? Sarvadhamam Sarvadhamam parityaja, right? Paritrag, give up everything, all religiosity, except for mamekam sharanam braja, right? Surrender to Krishna. So, and that surrender to Krishna manifests in so many different ways, right? And sometimes ways that we resist. So, we see it. We see it even in the current circumstance. It's interesting. Around the world, and we're not immune to this, as ISKCON's community grows, there are issues that come about as a result of growth, right? And one of the things we notice is it's a problem. You know, I'm a Bhakti-Vriksha leader. You know, I'm a Siksha guru now, and you have to listen to me. Yeah. So how to maintain the service attitude, right? And so one of the best ways to maintain a service attitude is to get your name on the roster, right? And then you become a servant, and it's like, oh no, but you got to do it, right? You got to go and serve, or even just turn up to work on time, right? Do you do what your boss tells you to do? Yeah, of course you do. So make Krishna the boss, make the devotees your boss, and then do what they tell you to do. And if you resist it, I don't want to do this, then you know that's not healthy. But if it's okay, I've got some, and you know, the hardest service, but one that gives the most advancement is go on Harinam, right? Here's a test. If you can go on Harinam, but you don't, it means you're lazy. What do you reckon? And I think I read somewhere that Lord Chaitanya says that Harinam's a good thing. Cheto darpanam marjanam bhavamaha davagni nivapanam sraya karoeva chandrikavataranam vidya vadu jivanam. Right? It's the life of transcendental knowledge. Right? And the other one is book distribution. Right? If you want to give your spiritual life a boost, do those two things regularly every week. Right? So there's the antidote. And if you don't feel like it, then you know that you're trapped. You're entrapped. Speaking from an expert. Although, you know, my age, I use age as an excuse. Oh, I'm too old now, I can't do this. And that may be true. Right? But yeah, so maintain some service. And especially service to others. So prasadam distribution, that's a good, you know, just do some humble service to the devotees. And that'll release you from entrapment. Yeah. And of course, for each of us, it depends on each circumstance to get the fine tuning. Any other comments or questions? But especially if you're young, which means, you know, 60 or less. These things, if we do those things, especially Harinam, especially book distribution, because these are the key elements of giving Krishna to others, right? And that's the mood of the gopis and the mood of Srimati Radharani. Srimati Radharani makes arrangements so the other gopis can be with Krishna. And the gopis are making arrangements so Radharani can be with Krishna. Got the idea? Yeah. So we're making arrangements for others to be with Krishna. That makes Krishna very happy, actually. And that's the mood of the most exalted devotees, is to bring others to Krishna. Not, I'm the most advanced, put me up, let me bathe the deities first. Or let me be at the front of the queue so I can choose all the best maha. Right? My experience is the last morsel in the maha tray, is the most tasty after you've fed everybody else. If you want the most tasty prasadam, it's what's left over after you've fed everybody else. Not, let me go and steal the maha off the maha plate. If you want to really taste the maha, give it away. Then it'll be the sweetest. So you're already serving prasadam. Keep it up. Huh? One of my first services was washing the pots, would you believe? Cleaning the kitchen and doing the breakfast divide. I don't know if we do it anymore, but we used to, the women and the men would eat in different places. So we'd have to divide the prasadam up. Half for the men and half for the women. Do we still do that now? Do we do that now? No? Okay. And then at breakfast time, I'd also serve. And I like burfi, like you all do too. But there's not enough burfi to go around for everybody, especially these days. But I made it a rule that I would never stash prasadam for myself. I could have, but I made it a rule, personal rule. And I remember there'd be half a dozen burfi sitting on the fruit tray, right? And I'd be taking it around, but I'd be internally praying, Krishna, let there be one burfi for me. Have you had that experience? Yeah. And then there'd be one burfi left, and there'd be 3 devotees at the end of the queue. Those last 3 devotees were agony. But I figured, well, put it this way, many times I got the burfi. I won the prize. They weren't interested in the burfi. But even if the burfi, was taken, have a guess what? I survived. And the prasadam still tasted good, I just didn't get a burfi. So, that was when I discovered, the last morsels of Mahaprasadam are the tastiest. If you've given everybody the prasadam, there's absolutely no loss. So that maintaining that service attitude is a sign of good health as a devotee. That's what we need to cultivate, the service attitude. And don't worry too much about me first. Me first is you're in trouble. Right? My experience is if you demonstrate and deliver by rendering service to the devotees, you'll automatically get respect anyway, right? You don't have to demand it. You'll get it anyway. We shouldn't worry too much about whether we're respected or not. We're not respectable anyway. Who are we kidding? Huh? Yeah, so we have to check that tendency to, want to be number one, the most important, the most advanced. Huh? Because, it's invariable that somebody more advanced than us will turn up. And then what are we going to do? Hey, I'm more advanced than you. Have a fight about it? That's childish, isn't it? When you think about it. And Prabhupada makes a point that, in an organisation like ISKCON, somebody's got to be in charge to tell the rest what to do. Otherwise we'll have chaos. So it's interesting we're seeing in ISKCON, as communities are expanding, as our global community is expanding, a bit of disgruntlement amongst the devotees. And oftentimes, hey, what about me? It's like, sit down. Sit down, shut up. Obviously we shouldn't be so yes, Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances. What was that? What was that silly? What was that contribution of you? But really, we do need to be respectful. We do need to hear, but at the same time, we also, all of us, have to maintain that service attitude. Yeah. And why we need close friends, and why we need to have friends who can tell us, pull your socks up. Also, you've got your socks on, good boy. Yes, you're doing very well. And you're, what's that? What's his name? Śrīram. You're a very handsome fellow, Śrīram. And I'm sure very intelligent also. Okay, Grantharaj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Maharaj Jayati ki jai.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Vandeham.
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Enam Kanvandam Aravindadalaya Taksham Bhagavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Bhagom Hikamaniya Vishesha Shobha.
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Anganiyasa Sakalen Priya Priti Manti Vasyan Dipan Dikayanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya.
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindam Adipurusham
Bande
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Enam Kanvandam Maravindadalaya Taksham Bhagavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kanda